Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Monday, the 22nd of July, comes to you from London. And we start, as always, by looking at the dollar index. It sank very heavily at the end of last week and has gradually recovered. So we're still slightly in bearish territory here, but that long-term trend on the dollar is still dominating. And if we look at the euro against the dollar, we see that the euro actually is still in bearish territory. So a little bit of an anomaly there. The dollar's bearish, the euro's bearish, but the dollar is the least bearish of the two based on the Eurodollar chart. So euro is still looking pretty weak. The Japanese yen, the dollar is looking stronger here, so that is normally a heads up. We're still bearish in the long and medium term charts, but short term we're starting to come through the cloud. So looking like dollar will strengthen a little bit. Sterling still pretty much in the doldrums, awaiting the announcement of a new prime minister this week, and we're sitting at 124.85 against the dollar. Just having recovered a little bit on that dollar fall, we're falling back on sterling, and of course the medium and long term charts are pretty bearish. Against the euro, sterling also looking stronger on the short-term chart, but the medium and long-term trends are still bearish. And against the Swiss franc, we see this morning sterling falling away, flight to safety on the Swiss franc, and we're bearish there as well. Taking a look at Bitcoin, we're sitting at $10,600, so holding that $10,000 level, but of course we've been up as high as $13,000, seen a lot of volatility lately in Bitcoin, so it'll be interesting to see whether we can recover and go higher. The S&P 500 index was down on Friday and just pushing prices below the cloud. Not enough to take the lagging line lower though, and the Nasdaq also just falling away there a bit on Friday, and the Dow was down 0.25% on Friday as well. The Russell 2000, the broader based index, still has work to do to recover, and this is more clearly bearish. Looking at the futures this morning, the S&P future up very slightly, the Nasdaq E-mini up 0.2%, not enough really to say that the market will open higher, so flat is really what we'd say there. The UK market is up slightly this morning, and mid-caps in the UK also up slightly, just sort of edging higher. And the DAX up by a similar amount, and the CAC Quarante also up slightly. Markets generally just awaiting signs from Wall Street. The Japanese market was down overnight, and the Hang Seng market also down. More turbulence in Hong Kong politically. Shanghai was down, but the new STAR index, the new Nasdaq style index in China, did open with a surge, and the Sensex was down 1%. So we're seeing a bit of a fallback there. The Aussie market was pretty flat, and of course the big news over the weekend was the detention of a British tanker in the Straits of Hormuz by Iran. That has pushed oil up by 2% at the opening this morning, so we see Brent crude up quite sharply. Not enough to take the chart bullish on that short term, and the medium and long term charts still have a lot to do, and WTI also. So interesting that the price of crude oil not reacting violently to that news. It shows that we're sort of in a bear trend. Oil is susceptible to being dampened by that. So had we been in a bull trend, we might have seen a bigger move on that news. Looking at US nat gas, we're sitting at $2.29. So still sitting very much in the doldrums. We just see the long-term picture here of US nat gas just slowly deteriorating. Gold is up slightly at 14.28 this morning, so very much holding that bullish trend on all three time frames. Silver similarly is up and looking bullish on all three time frames. Not quite on the bullish scale on the long-term chart, but it's going to come through. We see the prices are significantly above. It's just a matter of time that the lagging line will wander out of the cloud there. So we are looking bullish there for silver. US 10-year yields sitting at 2.04 this morning, so just still sitting in the doldrums there as well. Bearish on all three time frames. Taking a quick look at the equity markets, and here I'm using Yahoo Finance for that. We see here pretty much a sea of red. Markets just bearish generally. Looking at Friday's performance in the Dow, the best performer there was Boeing, strangely, having announced a provision. The market warmed to that. for the Max 3 crisis, so the 737s, but interestingly, the shares went up. American Express were the worst performer, down 2.8%, but the chart is still looking fantastic. So, um, interestingly, we saw one of those days where the weaker stocks were the ones that got great trends, and the stronger ones were the ones that were looking less good. That seems to be a theme at the moment. Looking at the Nasdaq, we saw JD Hunt Transport, Tesla there actually looking pretty good, up 1.8%. Quite a strong recovery from Tesla, but they're still underperforming the market so far this year by 29%. So we saw this deterioration. Lots of work to do for Tesla. This is a bit of a relief rally, really. And on the downside, on the Nasdaq, we had some pretty big names in there, but Netflix is the one to watch. That their news on subscribers last week was enough to really drop them right into bearish territory on the short-term chart. A really bad week there on the weekly candle, and they had 20% outperformance. They gave most of that up last week, so they're back to pretty well par on the Dow. The Aussie market overnight wasn't that badly hit. We saw Speedcast International up 6.7%. It's looking pretty strong there, and InfoCare were the worst performer, down 6.5%. And if we look at the Nifty 50 in India, the best performer was Yes Bank. Still a terrible looking chart, but sometimes this one does seem to be in the leaders board. Vedanta also looking less strong, and here we see the live prices coming in from Yahoo Finance. And if we look here, the worst performer, Bahar Ginserve, down nearly 6%. That chart starting to crumble, looking a little bit worrying there. And we see here the relative from 20% outperformance now to 7% unperformance. So it really is a change here, with new downside targets some 14% lower. Looking at the Aussie market, the European markets now, we start by looking at Europe, the UK. TUI, the best performer, up this morning, up 2%. Sainsbury's up 2% as well. On the downside, we've got ITV. They're down 3.1%, and still a terrible looking chart. On the 250 in the UK market, we've got Ted Baker. They're up just under 1%. Not a great looking chart though, underperforming the market so far this year by 50%. And if we look at the downside, Woodford Patent Trust, Capital Trust, still in the doldrums. A lot of volatility there, but still. Really, the Woodford story just not going away. Looking at the European market, we've got Philips. They're up in Amsterdam. They're actually making new highs, so that's pretty strong for Philips, outperforming the market quite nicely by 13% so far this year. On the downside, this morning, we've got Enel, the Italian energy provider, electricity provider. Their chart looks amazing, but they're falling away quite heavily this morning, down 1.7%. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.